and welcome to the second episode of the Jurassic Mark podcast, where we put the mark in Denmark. Today we are going to be talking about a very interesting film. You see, when I started the blog up, my initial intent was to use it as an excuse to explore a lot of movies that I hadn't seen before. I like movies, but there's a lot of what people might call mandatory watches that I haven't checked out yet. So I came to the decision once a month to seek out something that looked really, really bad, just so that way every single review I post wasn't just, wow, it's as good as everyone said, you know? It would offer some more variation in what the blog had to offer. And usually I'm pretty happy to do it. I get what I think are some of my favorite reviews that I've written out of watching really, really bad movies. As much as I hated, and I mean hated, Batman and Harley Quinn, boy did it feel good to just roast that thing over an open fire. But sometimes you come across some stuff that's really hard to get through, and other times you encounter stuff that's just so weird that you can't help but talk about it. And that's why with this episode we are talking about Otto is a Rhino. Now this is from Denmark, from a studio called Krone Films, and they put out other movies you may have heard of, movies like Ivan the Incredible and Freddy Frogface, just those weird CGI abominations you always see at like the Redbox, and you think, who the hell would ever watch this? Well, the answer is sad, pathetic people like myself. So I've watched Otto as a Rhino, and oh boy, this is just as strange as you would expect from these guys. I would honestly feel like kind of an idiot giving this a real critique, so let's just talk about the plot. I'm pretty sure this is based off of a children's book, and that really explains a lot of it, because there's a lot of plot elements that make no sense and don't go anywhere and are really, really simplistic and make the thing feel like something for toddlers, but then at the same time there's no real, like, moral or message. At least when it's a children's book, it doesn't have to have a moral or message. The whole point of it can just be, oh, it's some fun prose, you know? It's something colorful that can get kids interested in reading. So it doesn't really necessarily have to say anything to them. If it does, bonus, but it's okay to have nonsensical plot elements in a picture book that doesn't have a whole lot of words. But this kind of runs into the Dr. Seuss problem, where it's an adaptation of something that I'm going to imagine doesn't have a lot of meat to its story. So they have to stretch it out to be over an hour long, and boy does it get painful, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So the first thing I noticed about this that was really, really weird is that this is apparently distributed by Universal. We got the big, gorgeous Universal Studios logo, and I have no reason why they would ever back this, because, man, I can't imagine this bringing in any money, and I mean at all. But then we immediately see a lot of much, much cheaper looking logos, and we get to our main title, which is Otto is a Rhino, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm fairly certain that the poster and the DVD cover and all of the press for the English localization of this film says that it's called Otto the Rhino, not Otto is a Rhino, but that's what the title card is, so hey, who the hell knows? It's really confusing, and it makes you wonder, what was the story behind bringing this stateside? I mean, there has to be some sort of tale to tell here. Who are the people at Krone Films? Who's the person in the US who discovered them? Or did they come to Universal? Why did they get picked up? I mean, I guess you could say that they were distributed just to make a quick buck at the checkout line. You know, some nearsighted old lady sees CGI cartoon characters on the cover of a DVD case and assumes it must be Pixar or something, grabs it for their nephew or grandkid or whomever. That's an easy couple of bucks right there. But I don't know, something about this tells me there has to be more to it. They keep making these movies, but they feel like such a scam, especially because they reuse the same character models over and over and over again. It almost feels like I'm recognizing actors. I'm seeing so many of the same character models from Freddy Frogface and Ivan the Incredible in this one, and they use the same model for their protagonist in all of these movies. It's really jarring, and it never ceases to get on my nerves. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get to the actual plot, shall we? So, The movie opens up having literally nothing to do with rhinos. We basically see this kid whose name is Topper playing around with his friend Vigo. You are like the buzzing of flies to him. And they screw around with an abandoned pram and get into all sorts of hijinks that I imagine Dutch kids must get into all the time. They mess up people's gardens and generally caper about. And they head off to the last day of school before summer vacation, where the teachers assign them to talk about what they're doing over summer break. And all of the kids give pretty normal responses. You know, they're going on vacation or they're going to their grandfather's farm. And then Topper wheels in a film reel and shows them stock footage of animals in Africa, saying that that's where his father is, because apparently his father is a sailor. And he proceeds to say a lot of really weird things. Now, this is another detail with this movie where I don't want to beat on it too bad, because I feel like some of the writing must have been lost in translation. Like, he says things like his dad crashed so hard into the dock that he lost his teeth, which I don't know if that's just old-timey sailor jargon or if that's like a Dutch phrase that was just localized poorly. It's a mystery. This whole movie is a mystery. Everything these people put out is a mystery, and that's why I just can't let it go. This is also where we get to hear Topper talk about how his dad has a girl in every port, which is really, really funny, because it's not framed like, oh, the little kid said something inappropriate where they don't know the context to it. Like, no, he's like, yeah, my dad's a badass. He has a girl in every port. Like, he's proud of him. And it's like, oh, okay, kid. But the teacher kind of reprimands him for not really understanding the assignment. And all of his schoolmates just start heaping scorn on him, questioning if he even has a father or if he's ever met him. It's really, really unnecessarily brutal. So he leaves school all dejected and brokenhearted, and he ends up finding a pencil on the ground. Now, this pencil becomes very important until it stops being important. He ends up graffitiing a wall with the pencil and realizes that anything he draws will disappear. At least that's his understanding of it. We, the audience, see that anything he draws with the pencil will pop off of it. You know, he draws a heart and writes his initials in it and the girl that he has a crush on, and the heart falls off. He does another one with an arrow through it, and when he's not looking, the arrow almost impales a caterpillar, which is honestly kind of an interesting idea as far as kids' stories go. I also need to mention the girl. Yeah, there's a girl character that he is head over heels in love with, and honestly, she's the most annoying part of this movie. The voice actress really, really isn't even trying, and all she serves to do is show up, be kind of catty, and maybe hint at inviting him to her birthday party before rescinding the offer, and then she brags about how she's definitely getting a puppy, but spoiler alert, she doesn't. And yeah, she's just kind of an unlikable person, and we don't really understand why the main character is infatuated with her, other than the fact that, hey, he was a boy, she was a girl. Could I make it any more obvious? Am I right? So he realizes that this pencil is magic and immediately runs home to tell his friend Vigo about it. And Vigo's dad runs the cafe at the bottom of their apartment building. This guy ends up being our villain, but we don't think that he's the villain because he just comes off as kind of a stuck-up jerk. Not really a villain, but he has a really bad heel turn in the third act, and I don't know why, but again, I'm getting ahead of myself. There's a lot to digest here. Can you get that? There's a whole lot to digest, and I'm very excited about it, so I need to make sure I stay on track. Let's see, where was I? Right, so he's trying to convince his friend Vigo the Carpathian about how this pencil is magic. So he takes him up to his apartment, which is decorated in all sorts of African memorabilia, presumably from his dad's travels around the world. And he clears all the paintings off of a wall and suggests that they draw something to bring to life. Now, you'd think that kids would have sort of an interesting imagination. They draw something unique, you know, they draw a spaceship or a pile of cash or, I don't know, a naked lady. They draw something that would result in an interesting plot point, but instead they just draw a big rhino. He just draws a big old rhino across his entire wall, and then immediately says, well, we deserve a snack, like they accomplished anything. Again, maybe this is just the localization, or who knows, maybe the writing is really that bad. So they go off and get a snack, and his scaredy cat friend tells him that there's something in the other room, and they go in, and oh my god, it's a big dumb looking rhino. And this thing is hilarious. You'd think that this is the usual, like, oh, it's a boy and his beast, boy and his magical creature friend. But no, this thing's just a dumb cow. It just sits in the middle of the room and eats everything. It doesn't go on an adventure. It doesn't have a fun personality. It doesn't care about the kid. It just sits there and exists. It's like the equivalent of getting your kid a goldfish. They're gonna, like, project all these feelings onto it, and it's just gonna sit there in a bowl until the day that it dies. So they think about what they should do with this rhino, and a whole lot of nothing happens for the whole middle part of this movie before he decides, hey, you know what? This rhino would make a perfect birthday gift for that girl that I like. And I can't even remember her name, but she's really, really gross to look at. Everybody's gross to look at in this movie. They all have bulging eyes and Gary Busey teeth and uncooked spaghetti hair. It's a really unpleasant movie. Everything's got lumps on it, and all the liquids move like it's the T-1000. It's really upsetting to take in from a visual standpoint. It's not a good time. But anyway, they decide to get this girl the rhino for her birthday because she kept talking about how she wanted a puppy, and they decide, and I'm not joking here, that a rhino is basically kind of a puppy. But now the primary focus of the film ceases to be, we've got a rhino in our apartment, and becomes, well, how are we safely going to get this rhino downstairs? They have a magic pencil, and they consider drawing an elevator, and they don't, for whatever reason. At some point, the rhino eats the pencil, so I guess that plot hole's been nicely filled. But they try and convince a bunch of people that they have a rhino to try and get help with it. And actually, I completely forgot about my favorite scene in the entire movie. Right, so they discover that the rhino likes bread. That's the first thing they feed it. They walk in and it's like eating the carpet, so they give it a loaf of bread and it goes nuts over it. So they decide, we need more bread. So they run into town and they find the main kid's mom and they shake her down for some money to go buy 10 loaves of bread. He gives the money to his friend, says go to the baker's, buy 10 loaves of bread. Pretty cut and dry, pretty simple. Maybe a little odd for a kid to be buying 10 loaves of bread, but, it's a business. So he walks into the bakery, and there's this humongous woman, just this big, fat, ugly beast of a cow standing behind the counter. And she asks him, oh, what do you want? And he says, I'd like 10 loaves. And she takes such offense to this. She assumes that he's messing with her. And starts screaming and yelling at him and calls her husband from their basement, which is lit with a red light bulb, so it looks like he's ascending from the depths of hell itself. And he comes out, and he's like 2 feet tall, and they both sound like Power Rangers villains. Like, she's standing there like, what do you want? And he comes up like, he wants to buy bread. Why does he do this? And it's such a stupid conversation. It's like, you know how they say Seinfeld is a show about nothing? This movie is a bunch of conversations about nothing, but like actually about nothing, because they say that about Seinfeld, like, oh, it's a show about nothing. Things happened in that show. People went about their lives in the world of Seinfeld. In this movie, it's literally just conversation after conversation, scene after scene about nothing, and they harangue this kid. They like manhandle this kid and yell at him for daring to ask if he could purchase 10 loaves of bread from their establishment. He wants to give them business, and they're reacting like he just asked them to make him a gay wedding cake. It is absurd. I actually almost started enjoying the movie, like, unironically by this point, because this scene is so damn funny. But anyway, they end up tricking them out of the bread. They send the other guy back, and he stands in the middle of the store, and I can't believe how stupid this is. He stands there, and they say, are you gonna buy anything? And he goes, no, I'm not buying anything. And they say, what? How dare you? You will buy at least 10 loaves of bread. And he goes, okay. And he pays them for the bread, and that's the end of the conflict in that scene. So now the rhino has food. Where was I in the plot? Right. So they're trying to get the rhino out of the apartment. And by this point, Vigo's dad, who runs the cafe, his name is Otto Lion. He gets wise to the fact that there's a rhino up there, and he decides, I need to get rid of this. I don't know why. I mean, I guess why any reasonable person would want to get rid of a rhinoceros in their apartment building, but like I said, the thing's not, like, violent. Like, it's not a virile male, it's not charging anything that looks at it funny, it's just sort of sitting there eating the drapes. Like, it's just a big, dumb cow. I think he drew it wrong and gave it some damage, but he wants this thing out. And that actually leads me to another scene that I kind of liked, just because all the humor in this movie is so weird and wrong and stupid, and this one actually works like an actual bit. So, compared to everything else, it's actually not that bad. But he calls up the zoo and tells them that there's a rhino he wants to sell them. And the zookeeper gets very excited. He's like, oh, a yellow rhino, that's great, that's excellent. And he ends up asking the guy his name, and he says, oh, I'm Lion. And the zookeeper goes, uh-huh, yeah, so you're a lion selling a rhino? And the guy's an idiot, so he doesn't get it. He just, oh, yeah, that's right. I'm Mr. Lion, I'd like to sell you my rhino. And the zookeeper goes, oh, are you a funny man? And he goes, not particularly, no. And they have a little, back and forth with that. I don't know. You gotta cut me some slack here. I mean, Jesus, just look at what I'm dealing with. This kid looks like Simple Jack from Tropic Thunder. It's a rough time. But the dad who owns the cafe figures out that he's got a rhinoceros. He tries to offload it on the zoo. That doesn't work. So who does he call but the police? Which, I mean, yeah, there's a rhino in your building. Call the police. So he calls the police, and the cops come, and the kids find out that the cops are coming to get the rhino. So they form a barricade and get spears, and they're prepared to stab a bunch of police officers to protect their maybe magical imaginary yellow rhino that they conjured forth from the wall. And then the rhino promptly eats their barricade before the cops show up. So the police chief shows up, and they talk about what they need to do with the rhino. And the rhino ends up eating the pencil and the police chief's hat, and then they fall through the ceiling into the apartment of a deaf lady that lives below. And then they keep arguing about what to do with the rhino, and then the rhino starts choking. So the police chief gives it the Heimlich maneuver and saves the rhino's life. And now the rhino likes him. It hasn't paid attention to any human in this movie. It's just drifted around like an ocean sunfish. Like, it just hasn't done anything, but now it suddenly likes this police officer because he saved its life. So now we have our main animal, our titular character, and the only connection he has to anybody is with the police chief we've met like 5 minutes ago. So the police chief is all about keeping this rhinoceros. He's treating it like a puppy he just found. He loves it. They're actually kind of great. They're the only characters in this movie that really work. Everyone else is either an idiot or an asshole. So at this point, the cafe guy gets very upset. He calls the fire department, because I guess where do you go after you've called the chief of police to get rid of a rhinoceros in your apartment building? And the fire department rolls on up. And this part I also kind of liked too. I know I'm saying that a lot for this movie, but understand, there's like 3 things that I kind of sort of liked. One of them was ironic, and this movie's over an hour long. So keep that in mind. I did not enjoy this movie. But the firemen show up, and they're complete idiots with big stupid voices. And I don't know. I was so out of it and weary by this point that just a bunch of firemen rolling up and being like, oh, she's got cookies in there. I would like to eat the cookies. Oh, wee. Like, that was enough to tickle my funny bone. It wore me down. It held my sense of humor to the grindstone until it was searing hot and dull. This movie does a lot to a man, It's a lot. It's a lot. It's Otto the Rhino. Otto is a rhino, excuse me, I'm sorry. Forgive me for that slight. But anyway, so the fire department shows up, and they also like Otto. They think he's a great rhino. Incidentally, they hint that the reason the cafe owner really doesn't like the rhino is because the rhino stole his name. His name is Otto, and the rhino's name is Otto, and the kids named the rhino after the guy, like, as a gag. to the point where he's like, I was Otto first, and he's very upset about it. So maybe that's his entire villainous motivation, but basically, everybody's hanging out, having a grand old time in this deaf woman's apartment with a rhinoceros drinking coffee, and then he grabs a fire hose and starts spraying it in through the window. What his goal is, I don't know. He says he doesn't want the rhino to fall through the ceiling again and mess up his cafe, but it's not like he's helping the situation. So he sprays a bunch of water into the room, and the rhino drinks all of it, and then that's enough for the rhino to fall through the ceiling again with everybody. And they fall into the cafe, and everybody on the street says, wow, look, there's a rhino in that cafe. And they all flood into the cafe and start buying things. So now the cafe owner loves the rhino. And the policeman loves the rhino, and the fireman love the rhino. And everybody loves the rhino except for the little boy, who, like, should have a connection with the rhino. Like, if we're going off of the conventions of this kind of genre, like, this kid brought this rhino to life, you know? This is his Frosty the Snowman, and he has no connection to him. I'm not even sure that the rhino knows who this kid is, and looking at him now, he kind of looks like a really, really gross caricature of Nicolas Cage. And I should have mentioned, there was another important scene that I forgot about. Before he brought the fire department over, they start arguing about what to do with the rhino, and the police chief decides, oh, well, he's mine now because I love him. So he takes the kid and he throws him into a closet to cool down, and he ends up throwing him into the kid's own closet, and a bunch of letters fall on top of him, and these are letters that the kid wrote to his dad, who is sailing around the world and also Africa. They never really specify if he's living in Africa or if he just goes to Africa a lot because he's a sailor, or if he ran away, or if they're divorced, or if he's dead, or what. They never explain this until the dad shows up at the end. Again, spoiler alert for Otto is a rhino, but we'll get to that when we get to that. So the kid is pretty deep in the closet until his mom finds him there. And this part actually also made me laugh really loud because they set it up like it's going to be the sad emotional scene. Like, we're at the kind of dire point in the climax where we're not sure if he's going to bring the rhino to the girl's party, and he's feeling sad about his dad. And they completely undercut it by revealing that the kid's a complete idiot, because he finds all the letters and he confronts his mom and he's like, why didn't you ever send these letters to him? And the mom's like, oh, sweetie, you addressed them to my dad on one of the 7 seas. I couldn't mail them. And it's like, wow, you know? Normally this would be a, you know, sweetie, I'm sorry, I never told you this, but your dad died before you were born, you know, or something like that. But instead it's just like, sweetie, I'm sorry, you're just an idiot. You're too stupid to reestablish a connection with your own father. I would help you, but geez, even I have my limits, you know? Like, way to completely undercut your one attempt at an emotional moment in this entire movie in, like, the most tone-deaf way imaginable. So, getting back to where we were in the plot, he calls the fire department, they spray water at the rhino. Rhino falls through the floor into the cafe. Everybody goes into the cafe. Everyone's having a grand old time with this rhino. Everybody loves the rhino. Kid is upset because he needs the rhino to score with this ugly girl. But everybody else is enjoying the rhino. And he never once considers, like, maybe I should just, you know, get her a gift card, write her a poem, you know, go down to the Gap, get her a shirt or something, you know. No, he has to bring over a rhinoceros. Nothing else will do. To the point where he doesn't even go to his friend's birthday party. She invites him, but in like a coy, like, oh, you can come over if you bring a present kind of way. So, I mean, I guess that's why he didn't show up, you know, because she was just sort of being duplicitous and catty the entire time. But then we get a shot of her alone at her birthday party. It's not a birthday party. It is a birthday gathering. It is a birthday duet. She's just sitting alone at a table for 2 with no lights or music or anything. And it's meant to be, again, it's meant to be really sad, but it ends up just being really funny. Because it makes you wonder, oh, is this a plot point? Like, did she like him too? And the birthday party was like a ploy? Or were they just too lazy to actually animate a birthday party going on around her? You know, we'll never know. We will never, ever know until they release this through the Criterion Collection and get a nice commentary track going on it. So anyway, this kid is asleep in the middle of the night when suddenly out of nowhere his dad shows up. And his dad is a big, burly, Bluto-looking guy who just waltzes back into his son's life in the middle of the night. And his son explains how the Rhino works. So the dad comes back from his travels to these fictional islands, and I can't for the life of me remember what they're called. They might as well be called the Ooga Booga Islands, honestly. Like, it is not the most sensitive film, you know, speaking from a cultural standpoint, but the dad comes back and he explains, oh, I've been looking for a yellow rhino because the chieftain has promised that anyone who brings him a yellow rhinoceros will be gifted his 3 most beautiful wives. And it's like, wow, what a conversation to have with your wife and child after presumably years missing at sea. Like, that's going to be a real fun conversation after Junior there goes to bed. So, what's this kid's name? Topper. Yeah, what a name for a child. Explains to his deadbeat creep of a dad, oh, that's great, because I just conjured a yellow rhino. And he tells him the entire story through a series of increasingly ridiculous pantomimes. And the dad is not fazed by this in the slightest. Really, no one is, when he reveals that he conjured a rhinoceros out of their wall, like an episode of Stranger Things, using a magic pencil that no one can find anymore. Like, if this movie had some balls, they'd kill that rhino. They'd cut him open and get the pencil out and draw, like, a doomsday device with it. That'd be awesome. I'd watch that movie, but unfortunately, this is Otto is a rhino. So the next day, everyone is still fawning over the rhino. The guy who owns the cafe is retheming his cafe to be yellow rhino themed because Otto is bringing in such revenue. So he had a problem with this thing back when it wasn't making him money. Now that this animal is useful, you know, in a strictly capitalistic sense, now he's a good guy. So, you know, alright. I mean, if it's any consolation, birds keep taking dumps on him throughout the entire final act of this movie. So I guess that's his penance for being an all-around bad guy. So they decide that the best thing to do for the rhino is to bring him to insert island name here and give him to the chieftain so that someone can get 3 beautiful wives out of it. And they bring him down to the docks where his dad's ship is, and the police chief comes along because he wants to say goodbye to the rhino. And they basically say, well, you know, the chieftain is going to need a royal rhino keeper. And the police chief goes, oh, wait, I could do that. So the police chief gets on the boat with the rhino, and they go, yeah, you'll also have 3 wives, too. And the police chief is like, oh boy, I'd make do with a single, but wow. And everybody feels like they need to, you know, take a warm shower after that part. And the dad reveals basically that he can stay with his son for a while, for a, you know, little while. Not forever. No, he's got a woman in every port, remember, but yeah, no, maybe until Christmas, you know, like he can stick around and I guess, you know, be a dad for a couple months, couple weeks maybe. And he reminds his son like, oh yeah, wasn't there a girl you were trying to get with? So he runs off to meet this gross girl and finds her sitting in her backyard, same as we left her, looking very sad. And he explains the whole situation. And this whole movie, whenever he tries to tell her, oh yeah, there's a rhino, come check this out, come hang out with me. Look, my rhino's an excuse for a date. I conjured a magical rhino. You want to hang out and see this cool mystical beast? And she just goes, haha, you're nuts. You're crazy. And then she just leaves. And he's like, look, you see that out there? The rhino's going home. And he points to the boat. And she goes, haha, you're nuts. That's a boat. And everybody wonders like, oh boy, what class did he find this girl in? But it all works out because even though she didn't get a puppy from her parents and was very upset about it, they end up giving her one of the parrots that the dad brought back. Yeah, I forgot to mention that, didn't I? He brought back 3 multicolored, color-coded parakeets who all make Yoshi noises. I'm not even joking. I tried to find the noise. I couldn't find it on any Yoshi soundboard, but I swear to God, it's from like one of the early like N64 Mario parties or something. Like, it's an old school Yoshi noise, but it is so definitely a Yoshi noise. I swear it. Look it up. Watch this movie until the end, until the very last scene to hear this Yoshi noise. I promise you it's worth it. Believe me. Yeah, and that's pretty much the entire movie. The Rhino goes back to unnamed fictional island, and the police chief goes to become a polygamist, and they give this gross girl a bird, so all three of the main kids have birds, and everybody lives happily ever after, except for, you know, everybody who's got holes in their apartments, and the family that will have to endure their deadbeat dad leaving again after X amount of days. It's a weird movie, and I try not to punch down with these kind of things. You know, if there's something with a really low budget, if I could see that they tried, like the Roger Corman Fantastic Four, you can read my whole review to get all the history about that. Long story short, they tried to make a Fantastic Four movie back in the 90s for a budget of $1 million. For a frame of reference, that is literally a 100th of the budget from the old, like, Fox Studios Fantastic Fours that came out in the mid-2000s. And it's not a good movie by any stretch of the imagination, but they put a lot of effort into it. You could tell that all the actors, even if they're not that good at what they're doing, they're still trying. The special effects are really cheesy and bad, but they shoot them in creative ways. It doesn't feel like a scam, even though it totally was a scam. It was an excuse for a German studio to hold on to the movie rights, which, coincidentally, that's exactly what Fox did with, you know, Fan4Stick, but that's a whole nother podcast. The point that I'm trying to make here is that just because a movie is, you know, ugly to look at, or had a low budget, or the people making it weren't very talented, doesn't mean that it can't have some positive qualities. I understand I'm not the target audience for Otto is a Rhino, but even judging it from a standard of who would be the target audience, this is a really, really bad kids movie. It's not a fun time at all. The plot doesn't make sense, so any older kids are going to be completely bored out of their mind by it, unless they're entranced, like I was, by the really hideous character design and general weird foreignness of the whole thing. And little kids aren't going to get anything from it because there's nothing fantastical. They bring a rhino out of the wall, and that's it. The entire movie takes place in an apartment. It's like a student film or something. There's a lot of unpleasant characters, and they talk about, like, getting drunk and beating each other up and stuff. Nobody's a positive figure. It ends with an old couple implying that they're gonna go do it. Like, it's just a gross movie. It's gross to look at, and there's no positive message behind it, which isn't to say that it has to have a positive message. And it's not to say that children's movies can't feature some edgier content, you know? People forget Dumbo has the title character get completely smashed, like, to the point of hallucinating. That's an entire musical sequence in Dumbo from the Disney Corporation. That's not enough to make a movie bad or inappropriate or whatever you want to call it. But the fact of the matter is, this is just such an unpleasant film. There's nothing endearing about it. There's nothing substantial to dissect. It's just a weird project, and I think this might be the last Crone film I have to watch for the blog, so in a way I'm almost sad it's over, because these things are just so darn weird. I still have Jelly Tarzan, Ivan the Incredible, saved on my hard drive, because if you're hanging out with some friends and you got a few drinks in you and it's getting late and you have nothing better to do, few things in life can beat the reactions you will get when you say, hey guys, check this out, and turn on one of these movies. It's absolutely spellbinding if you're in the right mindset. So, do I recommend Otto is a Rhino? No, God, no, never, not at all. It's bad, it's stupid, it's weird, it's gross. It's just not pleasant. However, if you're looking for something that's weird and stupid and bad and gross and unpleasant, you could seldom do better than this. This is like incredible, especially if you're an animation student. Oh my god. If you're an animation student and you want to see some wonky ass stuff, check out Otto as a Rhino. Hell, watch the entire trilogy of these films. I feel like I've made a connection with them over the past couple years that I've been watching these things, and man, I just love sharing this stuff with people. So, Otto is a Rhino. It's a weird time. It's not great. Hell, it's not even good. It's not even okay. It's bad, all around bad, but you owe it to yourself to check something like this out. It's that weird kind of bad. It's that special 2 a.m. kind of bad. It feels like something that they would show on Adult Swim to scare all the stoners who are up way too late watching. You know what I mean? This feels like a Too Many Cooks style experiment. If you're looking for something in that camp, give it a watch. That brings us to the end of this week's Jurassic Mark podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I definitely had my fun, all things considered. Check in next week for a new episode. Be sure to check out the blog to see my written review. If you like what you heard, make sure you leave a comment down below. Hit that like button. Hit subscribe too while you're at it. That'd really help me out. If you're feeling really helpful, share it around to your friends. I don't do this professionally or anything. I just do this because I like talking about movies. And if you enjoy hearing what I have to say about movies, well, I really appreciate it. I hope you had fun. Check in next week for a new review, a new podcast. Hopefully I'll be watching something a little bit better than this. Until next time.